Hello and welcome to our webinar, Me and You, Celebrating the Importance of Relationships with Albert Whitman and Company. I'm Julia Smith, Books for Youth Senior Editor at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. A link to today's slide list was included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download it, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the title list by copying the URL on this screen into your web browser. If you have any trouble, please contact us at webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and will pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Finally, Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. From there, you can select Show or Hide Subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting Subtitle Settings. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Betty Tekle, author of The Coolest Beard, Frances Park and Ginger Park, author of Grandpa's Scroll, and Moni Ritchie Hadley, author of ANZU and the Art of Friendship. We will hear a brief presentation from each author about their book and then move to the Q&A portion of the webinar. We'll start today with Betty Tekle. Betty is a marketer and storyteller who believes in the importance of teaching children tenderness and empathy. As an Eritrean citizen, or an Eritrean American citizen who immigrated at age 12, she especially likes to write stories with diverse and multicultural characters. Betty is currently based in Los Angeles, California, but enjoys living a nomadic life. Thanks for being here, Betty.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you to Albert Whitman and the Booklist for having me. I'm really excited to introduce you guys to The Coolest Beard, which will be released on April 1st, 2023. It's been about 2 years in the making for me, so I'm excited to share it with the world and kind of share my inspiration to how I brought this story to life. Julia, if you can go to the next slide. So a little about me. I am a marketer and a storyteller who believes in the importance of teaching children tenderness and empathy. I actually wrote this story during the heart of COVID, where I wanted to write a story about some of the lessons I learned from my own father. And although my father does not have a very cool beard, a lot of the lessons I actually learned from him and his generosity and his kindness are a lot of the lessons that Isaac is going to learn from his dad in The Coolest Beard. If we can go to the next slide. So to tell you guys about the story, the story is about Isaac and his dad, and it starts off with Isaac kind of just being in awe of his dad's very cool beard. Isaac and dad have this ritual where every few weeks they go to the barbershop for beard trims and haircuts. And that's where Isaac starts to see this kind of influence that dad has on the rest of the barbershop and most of the people that he encounters. Dad is loved, dad is adored, dad gets all the compliments, and Isaac really just wants to be like his dad. And he also sees that in this barbershop, there's a level of community and conversations that the adults refer to as grown folks business that Isaac is just not allowed to be a part of. And he so deeply wants to be a part of these conversations and to grow up and be just like dad. When he asked dad when he can be a part of these grown folks business, dad essentially tells him that when he grows up and he grows a beard, that he'll be able to have grown folks conversations as well. So here is when Isaac's imagination runs wild and he starts imagining all the things he could do when he grows a beard, including jump rope with it and use the beard itself to walk his dog. And he gets very excited about this idea of growing a beard to be just like dad. And one night he sees dad applying this beard oil. And when he asks dad what it is, he tells him that it's how he keeps his beard long by applying it every night. Isaac then decides that that is going to be his journey to growing a beard in the next few weeks. So by the time they go to the barbershop again, Isaac will have this long beard and he can be just like dad. And you see this journey of Isaac every night sneaking in and applying the beard oil and every day waiting for a little piece of hair to grow on his little face. And of course, we all know that by the end of the few weeks where he does this every night, even at one point running out of dad's beard oil and using olive oil, he does not grow a beard. And on barbershop day, he wakes up finally, just one last look in the mirror, and he does not have a beard, and he is very disappointed. And dad sees how disappointed Isaac is and decides, you know what, we're going to go to the barbershop and we're still going to have fun, even though Isaac is just a little hesitant. And when he gets to the barbershop, he is really received for the first time the way dad is. Everybody acknowledges him and everybody is kind of asking him how he's doing. And dad's barber, Cliff, essentially asks him if he'd like a shave. Isaac is very curious and wants to go get a shave as well, closes his eyes, sits on the barbershop chair. And that's when the guys at the barbershop essentially give him a little fake beard with shaving cream. And when he opens his eyes and he sees the beard, he is just more excited than ever. He has this long beard now, and he actually has the longest beard in the room. And dad tells him, now you can be a part of the grown folks conversation. And he's just so excited and he's curious what these conversations are. And it doesn't take him too long to realize that these conversations are actually just community conversations. There's an older gentleman named Mr. Williams who's hurt his hip, and the guys at the barbershop are trying to figure out ways to kind of help. And there's a moment where Isaac says he wants to help too and asks if he can walk Mr. Williams' dog for him while his hip heals. And at that point, Mr. Williams looks at dad and said, that boy is just like you. And this is a pivotal moment for Isaac because he realizes that what makes dad so cool had nothing to do with the beard. And it's actually the way dad takes care of everybody. And he sits back down, the beard goes away. And when they walk out of the barbershop, he looks up at dad and realizes that what he actually wants more than anything is to take care of people the way dad does. And it's the biggest lesson he learns. And he says he wants to be like dad, but at the same time, he still wants to grow the coolest beard. And that is the story. My favorite part, I have to give a huge shout out to Nicholas Alexander, the illustrator. He does a wonderful job of captivating Isaac's imagination. As you can see, when he starts imagining this beard, there's so many beautiful illustrations that you'll be able to see, and the excitement of this little boy being able to just grow a beard and be just like his dad. If you can go to the next slide, Julie. What to expect. You should expect fathers as everyday heroes. I think this was really important to me because you don't have to be Spider-Man to be your child's hero. There's ways that you can impart little lessons, and kids are always watching that dad. I love this image right here because Isaac is just always looking up and he's just watching. Dad isn't trying to be a hero. He already is. And another one is a relatable take on growing up and coming into your own. I don't know about anyone else, but even I used to watch my dad shave and deal with his facial hair when I was growing up, and little things that you watch your dads do and start thinking, I want to be just like dad. And then the third one is a really important one. It's barbershop as a community and family spaces. I wanted this to be a conversation about Black hair in terms of men as well. I think we hear a lot of conversations about Black hair with young Black girls and their moms, but there's a conversation to be had in barbershops where men are getting together, getting haircuts and beard trims. And in these moments where somewhere that you go as a ritual consistently, there's a lot of beautiful conversations, and healing and community spaces are just a space where people can kind of love on each other and take care of each other. And can we go to the next slide? Thank you, everyone. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the coolest beard on April 1st, 2023.
Thank you so much, Betty. Next, we will hear from Francis Park and Ginger Park. Francis and Ginger are Korean-American authors of books for children and adults. They have received multiple awards for their work, including the International Reading Association's Children's Book Award, the IRA CBC Teacher's Choice Award, the Notable Books for a Global Society Award, the Patterson Prize Book Award for Young Readers, and the Bank Street Book Award, among others. They live in a suburb of Washington, D.C. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us. We're honored to be here.
We're absolutely honored to be here. And thank you, Booklist, and all for being here. You know, Grandpa Scroll was actually inspired by our own father's untimely death 44 years ago, almost 44 years ago. He was very young. We were very young. And it was very difficult for us to process his death. It took a very long time. Grieving lingered. And for us, it helped us that our mother shared a lot of stories about our father. Because, you know, when you're a child, you think that you are going to have your parents forever. And when you lose one, you realize maybe you didn't know everything you wanted to know about that person. And our mother was just always an incredible storyteller. And she shared all about our father's boyhood. And the more we listened, the easier it was for us to let go of our grief and, you know, more or less embrace the memory and celebrate and honor our father's life. And so Grandpa Scroll is similar in that it's a book about grieving and you know, it's a difficult topic, particularly for children. How do you talk about death to children? Well, in Grandpa Scroll, a little girl is a pen pal with her grandfather who lives in Korea, and he's never been to America and she's never been to Korea. And letters are actually translated through the mother, who writes them back in Korean and reads the Korean letters to her daughter. Grandfather is supposed to come visit for his first visit in America. Unfortunately, he tragically dies. And Francie, you want to continue?
And they're still connected through writing, because she knows him, he knew her, and in the end they create a scroll together, even after his passing. And the inspiration for this story is because our dad worked for the World Bank, and when we were growing up, he was gone overseas at least half the time.
Yes.
And the only thing that connected us with him,
And you can switch to the next
were his letters.
letters.
You know, this was decades before emails and texts, and there was a 10-day lag time, but every day we knew we were going to get at least one letter from him, and usually a postcard as well. And that his presence was still with us. And even now, 44 years later, we have those letters, we read those letters, and it keeps him alive to us. So yeah, that I just think the power of writing. And you know, back then there was a 10-day lag time, so he would get our letters 10 days late and vice versa. And you remember, because he would go from hotel to hotel, right, in different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he, you know, wouldn't see the letters because our letters were en route to a different hotel, and he'd be like, where are my letters? You know,
And
I'm working. And then he'd arrive at a hotel and there'd be 5 letters for him.
So that was really the inspiration. And the interesting thing about Grandpa Scroll, and I think what most readers will be really surprised about, is that the story starts out really happy. And yet what happens is that Grandpa dies before he's supposed to make his trip to America. So all her dreams of showing her where she lives in the city of Washington, D.C. are completely changed when they actually have to go to Korea. So the book takes a complete turn where they're in DC and then suddenly they're in Korea. And you can actually go to the next slide if you like. You know, fortunately, you know, as Francie said, our father traveled a lot. And the reason why we still love to talk about pen pals is because we were writing letters to our father before he got to the airport. And as you can see, he went everywhere. He traveled all over the world. The cool thing is that he sometimes took us on trips as well, many times to Korea. So in writing this book, a lot of people asked us, wow, you really captured the countryside of Korea. We wouldn't have been able to do that had we not visited there as children.
And in Grandpa's scroll, when she is in Korea, she remembers all the phrases that he told her, like walking along in the crops and the sky and Soraksan Mountain. And it just comes alive for her.
It's important for her to find closure. The main character's name is Lily. And in the book, the grandfather talks about a scroll that he is painting in his home in Korea, in the countryside. But he explains to her that they're going to finish the scroll together when he arrives in America. Well, you know, as we said, he passes away beforehand, so she goes back to Korea. And when she goes back, she sees the scroll and everyone says, oh, but the scroll is finished. And she realizes, no, it's not finished. And she says, Grandpa said we were going to finish the scroll together. And she finishes the scroll because it's only half done. It's a poem. And he's written the first section of the poem or the stanza, and she does the second part, completes it. And in doing so, she deals with her grief.
And finds closure.
And then
and hangs it in her room.
Yes, you can switch it to the next. So we wanted to just share with you, you know, how this book, you know, really means so much to us because, you know, as we said in the book, the letters go back and forth in Korean and in English. And as you can see here, our father wrote us many letters. They were oftentimes in Korean, and our mom would have to read them to us because we could not read Korean.
But we would always look for our name in English.
Yes. And
Is
then
he
up
talking
above,
about us?
you see that, you know, we wrote them in English. You can go to the final. I think, is there a final one or is that it? That might be it. Yeah, that might be it. But anyway, so we do hope that you know, when you're sharing this book with your students, what we hope is that, you know, kids, because there are kids who lose their parents or their grandparents, that this book, we hope that this book will help these children get through a very difficult time. I know that when I was a child, I wish I had a book like this. It would have helped me a lot. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Now we will hear from Moni Ritchie Hadley. Moni is the author of The Star Festival, a 2022 Bank Street College Best Children's Book of the Year. Growing up as a half-Japanese military brat, she found frequent moves and new schools challenging. Today, she surrounds herself with her family, 5 pets, and long-lasting friends in Los Angeles, California. Take it away, Moni.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Give me just 1 second. Okay. Can you see that? Yeah. Hi, everybody. First, thank you for having me, Booklist and Albert Whitman, and I've been enjoying all the talks so far. I thought I'd talk a little bit and just unfold my path to writing the story, ANZU and the Art of Friendship. This story is about a young girl who's moved to a new school that's already in session. So she has some hesitancy and some anxieties about making friends. She finds out that the teacher is doing an origami unit. So she's thrilled about that because she has some experience with this. She thinks that she can be helpful, and she thinks that will be a great way to make friends. But the origami proves to be challenging for the students in the class, and therefore it kind of thwarts her plan a little bit. So we see through the unfolding of the story that some of the skills for learning origami, patience and practice, are also the skills that she needs to make friends. And I thought I'd highlight different parts of my life that kind of lent itself to the story. Oops. I come from a military family, and you can see I am biracial. My mom is Japanese, and my dad is Caucasian white from Western European. I've lived in Japan quite a bit. You can see my Aunt Miko and just my whole family there, I think in a train station. We moved a lot. By the age of 11, I lived in all these places: California, Texas, Arizona, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Japan twice. We would kind of bounce back and forth. So every time I started a new school, it was like, I felt like starting from the bottom up again, like, okay, just take a deep breath, have to do this all over again. And I'm introverted. I was very shy. So it was a struggle for me, which lends itself to one of the first themes in this book, which is friends making friends. I have examples of my report cards below here, and you can see they refer to me as Moana, which is my birth name. Moana has almost completely licked her bashfulness. Moana seems to have overcome her shyness, and then just plain old shy. That was always the case every time I had a new report card. Second term, probably most of these were written. So we didn't have computers, we didn't have cell phones, and even phone conversations just really weren't allowed because of the cost of them. So I would write letters to friends, try to keep in touch with friends. But, in military families, people are moving so often, and they get stationed at a temporary housing and then move into regular housing. And the time it took for letters to get overseas and then to be forwarded, it just didn't quite work. So I really have no friends from my elementary school time. The other obvious theme of the story is the practice of origami. And because I grew up in Japan and I am Japanese, this was a regular part of my life and a craft that we did at home. But it was also done in school on the military base. So I lived off the base in the community, the Japanese community, and went to an American school. So there were a few hotbuds like me, but many of those students were from different parts of the United States. And this experience overseas was their first new culture that they were in. So we had a Japanese culture class, and in that class, we were taught some history and traditions and art forms such as origami in that class as well. So this is a picture of my grandmother, Akiko Ikuta, and I put this here because I have very distinct memories of making her a senzaburu, which is the string of 1,000 cranes. The crane represents good fortune and longevity. And after World War II, it was really this string was popularized and became a symbol of wishing somebody good health. And I have a very distinct memory of when my grandmother became ill, of folding the 1,000 cranes at home and on the plane with my sisters to make one for my grandmother. Oops, I'm sorry. Oh yeah. So this book came about because my first book was published with Albert Whitman and Company, the Star Festival, and through those connections, I was contacted about the second story. here's a peek inside, and the illustrator is Natalia Takayama, and I love her use of bright colors and contrast. And I love this spread because it really shows, a moment that ANZU is starting to connect with her classmates. Emotions are a really huge part of the story, and you can see that she's really experiencing some happiness here, while there's still students struggling with their origami practice over here on the side. I feel like it's a good conversation starter. This book is for kids experiencing emotions, because it often, I feel like, we say to kids like they shouldn't be sad or don't be angry, and they really need to know that it is okay to go through this, and it is an important part of life, and our emotions do inform our decisions and help guide our next steps. So and finally, I have this spread, which shows other connections that can be made with this story. So I put social emotional learning at the top because I feel that's a really important one. The picture of me is when I was working in a classroom. I was a teacher for 30 years. And after my first couple of years in the classroom, I started working for a small school called Carlson Home Hospital School in the Los Angeles Unified School District. And we were a specialized school that worked one-on-one with kids that were out for 2 to 3 weeks or longer. And in the beginning of my time there, we got my huge influx of students were kids with physical illnesses. But the last 10 years of my time there, there was a huge shift that happened, and the kids that I were getting were dealing with internal emotional struggles, and anything from bullying, depression, the whole umbrella. And I feel like that trend has just grown, especially after COVID. I hear from librarians, teachers, and parents that they want more books that deal with these themes and topics. So I hope ANZU, The Art of Friendship will be a conversation starter for these topics. It also focuses on mindfulness, and because origami can be a very solitary practice, but it can also be a very collaborative practice in the classroom, and obviously emotions. And other areas where it can be used are with the social sciences, a little bit of Japanese culture can be sprinkled in there. Vocabulary can be linked in with Spanish language, because the vowels are almost identical, a, I, U, E, O, and a, E, I, O, U. They have very similar sounds. With math, the obvious geometry, symmetry, and fractions can be used. And for the older kids, construction and architecture. There's some origami shapes that you can make individually and link them together to make really elaborate instruction or really elaborate figures. With language arts, obviously the symbolism is the metaphor of the practice of origami in relation to the practice of making friends. And then there's great examples of active verbs in the story. And then finally, as an art form, we need more arts, I feel, in the schools, and on top of just the creative aspect of it, working on hand-eye coordination, concentration, and fine motor skills. So my last slide. So that's it for me. I hope you check out the book. You can find out more about me at moniritchie.com. And I just want to thank Booklist and Albert Whitman and all of you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Moni. Now we'll move on to the panel portion of our webinar. So I invite all of our guest authors to turn on their videos. Let me take a second here. I have to do that too. Hello. Also to audience, this is a chance for you to send in any questions that came up while you were listening to these wonderful presentations. And if we don't get to them today, we will send them to the authors so they can follow up with you after the webinar. So don't worry if it doesn't make it in this time. but we've got a nice chunk of time. So let's see. I'll kick things off with sort of a general question for all of you. Let's see. I'm always interested in the artwork and illustrations and that process of seeing that come to life. And I know that authors don't always get to work super closely with their illustrators. And that process varies from project to project. So if you want to speak to that, but also like how did you feel when you first saw the art for your book?
I was overwhelmed. We've had, many picture books out there, and we've been pleased with all of them, but these illustrations floored us. For me, I can say that the artist just captured emotion beyond anything I could imagine, even just
raise the picture just so people can see, because we did not do it in
our
PowerPoint.
The downcast eyes alone that show the sorrow. I mean, that's what you feel when you think about the loss of somebody. I mean, I feel that today. And how many times have I said to you, Ginger, how did he do that?
Well, I mean, if I could interject as well, you never know how your text is going to be interpreted, and we thank Albert Whitman for just doing such an incredible job of searching for the perfect artist. It was not easy, because this is a Korean book, and the artist had to know a lot about the Korean countryside, and fortunately they found an illustrator who is actually in Korea, and the illustrations are just mesmerizing and just really capture the essence of the book.
Yes.
Yeah, I can actually jump in as well. The first time I saw this cover, I actually cried. Nicholas Alexander is a wonderful illustrator. He approached the artwork with just such empathy for the relationship and the dynamic between father and son. And I think my favorite part is how big Isaac's eyes are, and how they just seem to light up every time he's just kind of like consistently looking up at them. And I agree, like, you don't always get to see, and this is actually my debut picture book, so this is my first time being involved in this process. And you don't know what it's going to look like. And so I had all these images in my head, and I didn't expect them to be better than they actually are. It was significantly better. Isaac just looked so adorable. His dad looked cooler than I could have ever imagined him to look. And just the way the smiles and everybody in the community and the barber shop and everybody just seemingly just looking engaged and feeling engaged was my favorite part. And the other part is just the way he captured the imagination. I don't think it's easy to make a beard look like a jump rope. And when I wrote that, I was like, I hope this image of a little boy jump roping and using his beard as a blanket and stuffing toys in his beard, because that's what little Isaac was imagining. When I saw that he had actually captured that so perfectly, and capturing hair texture and black hair texture, he was just so amazing at it. I couldn't be any happier with this.
I think it's always a wow moment. You know, I don't really get pictures of characters in my head when I'm writing. I don't imagine them to look a certain way. So it's always just to see your book come to life is so amazing. And when I was told who the illustrator would be, I always do my little research and look them up and see what their art looks like. So then I get another picture, or I get a new picture of what I think it might look like. And then of course they tailor it specifically for your book, and it doesn't really look representative of their art that they might have online. So it's always just such a wow moment. And I thought Natalia did a great job. I love the colors she chose, and the high contrast, and it just represents happy, even though the kids go through these struggles, you know, ultimately it's just origami is a very bright art form, and I thought she just did a fantastic job.
Thank you. And all of you touched on this a little bit in your presentations, but I noticed that sharing culture is a really big theme in all of these books. And can you talk about what you hope readers are going to take away from the stories that you've presented?
Want us to go first? We'll go first.
Oh.
Well, we are Korean American, and all of our books do reflect our heritage for the most part. I think, you know, for us, it was really important for us to share through text and through images our experiences as Korean American. We grew up a long time ago in an era where we were the only Koreans in our community. If I wanted to see another Korean person at school, I would have to seek out my brother because we weren't in the same school. So for us growing up, we did not see a lot of the types of books that are being reflected in this presentation today. They were written for the masses, and it's been so positive to see the direction that books are going, because not only am I grateful that kids are learning about our culture, but I'm learning through the book, because I love children's books. I read them all. I'm learning about different cultures. You know, it's all of your books, Betty and Moni. I learned something from those, and I know children are too.
And also, no matter how strange or different a culture may seem to a child, you know, when you introduce them to literature that you know draws similarities between the two, it bridges that, and it's, you know,
They become
love
curious.
and emotion and everything is universal.
And they become curious.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There were a few points in yours that seemed like really great touchstones that were culturally specific in the story, but also so relatable to like almost everyone, where you have a family member who is maybe far away and you are just trying to communicate with them. So the idea of pen pals, especially when we had the pandemic. But I loved the parallels that the grandfather would draw between Lily like drawing on her iPad or some kind of technology versus his was really beautiful scroll, and like they were put on the same platform. And I think that kind of thing is really valuable for kids.
Absolutely. We had a lot of scrolls in our house
We did.
growing up. And
well, our dad actually found relaxation with his Korean calligraphy. And
yes.
yeah, we used to just watch him.
It
It was a silent thing. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Because that's going to be new to a lot of readers, I think. And
Yeah.
Absolutely.
that's a just wonderful portion of the story.
Oh.
You.
Moni.
Yeah, I hope kids take away just have a like an understanding, and an understanding for new people, new cultures, new art forms, whatever is new. Like I hope they can just take a moment and slow down, because I feel like we live in such a fast-paced world, like everything, it's the next screen and the plug in and let's do all this fast. And kids really need to know that, we can slow down, we can experience what's new and be in the moment, and then just trust yourself and let it happen, and let those moments happen, and let them go through what they need to go through to get to the next place. I think we do need to trust ourselves to do that.
Absolutely. Betty.
Sure. In terms of culture, as I mentioned, I wrote this story initially kind of channeling my relationship with my dad and the lessons. And I initially wrote the story as a father-daughter kind of story, because I was initially kind of thinking of kind of the Black cultural experience of hair, and my relatability with just how much hair is such a big part of Black conversations. And I just remember as a child getting my hair done and getting braids and just that being a big thing I did with my mom. But I realized very quickly that there weren't as many books in the market that had this same kind of Black hair conversation for little boys. And I have a nephew, I have cousins, I have a brother, and these conversations just happen so much in little Black boys' lives as well. And these rituals that little girls have where they go to get their hair done with their mom also happens with father-son relationships. And I wanted little boys to be able to see themselves too and just say, there is a big thing with going to the barber shop every few weeks. There is a big thing with my dad's beard growing longer. And I've been genuinely surprised already since kind of announcing the cover on social media, how many Black fathers have said, wow, we really see ourselves now for the first time with just the beard. And I think that's kind of what I wanted, is the importance of diversity in these children's books and young fathers being able to say, I see myself, and little boys just being able to say, yeah, like my dad does have a really cool beard. And the lesson not being about the beard, but about being kindness. That's what I hope everybody takes away is, the cover is going to be all about this beard, but the lesson that they take away is all about generosity, kindness, and empathy.
Definitely. And my next question really, you kind of answered it now and in your talk. So feel free to sit this one out. But if you have anything to add, always happy to hear it. But all the books show men in important, loving, nurturing roles within the family. And that is just sort of less visible, I think, within picture books as a whole. It definitely happens, but it's not the focal point of the majority of books. So why was it important for you all to have kids, like, make sure they had those stories too?
That's very interesting. I think for us, when we write, it's very personal, and losing a father figure very young, at least for us, we like to bring him alive. And and I also think that it's important when you're rearing a child that if there is a father figure, that they participate. And I think that they like to read stories where there is a figure that they can relate to. So for us, it's more of an organic process. We don't think in terms of let's write this book so there is a male figure for children to relate to, because in truth, not every child has a father figure. But again, it's important to us because we lost our father very young.
Yeah, I don't know how much I really thought about it, but I'm trying to reflect on the reasons why I chose a grandfather for this particular book. And I think first of all, just the older generation, it's really nice to represent that generation in the stories. My mother lives with me, so I think it's my daughter will look back someday and think this was really special, because I didn't know my grandparents that well. And then my father, subconsciously, I think maybe it ended up being a man, because my father was absent a lot because he was off, doing things for the military. So he wasn't there a lot. But when he was around, he's very gentle, and even though he's in this role, this very traditional role that, we might see for men, tough and strong and, military. He was the gentle one of the family. And so was my grandpa, the American side. And so I think that was just a natural choice for me to have Oji-san be the comforting person for ANZU in the story.
So suffice it to say that we all wrote about men in our lives we loved.
Always important to have.
Yeah.
Always. I love it.
I will say, Julia, that was a tough question.
I said, Ginger, you answer this one. But a great one. Yeah, yeah.
You all gave wonderful answers. I mean, there is no one answer to that. I think it's great to see just like the variety of roles men can fill when you do have these traditional images put forward so often. So you all do wonderful jobs of showing just like that variation. Let's take a minute to have a couple just more targeted questions to individuals. Betty, you were talking at the end of the last response about like kindness being the ultimate message. And to just sort of elaborate on that, you've got this little boy who admires his father so much, and it's the coolest beard, and he thinks his dad is the coolest. So you draw that line that equates cool with kind. And I think that's an awesome message. How important is it to you that young readers understand that they don't have to wait to grow into that role? Like they can do those things even as kids?
Yeah, I think very important. I think for a lot of us who look up to our dads, we're learning these lessons even in adulthood, is trying to figure out why we kind of adore these men in our lives so much. And it's easy to equate it with that one thing that everybody else sees them as. I know for me, it was my dad was an entrepreneur. And so I thought that is what makes him cool. For Isaac, it is this beard. And it's the thing that you hear being complimented, right? It's the thing that is very obvious kind of on the exterior, is just to be able to say, this is the thing that I want to emulate because it's the thing that people compliment the most. And I think it was important for me to talk about the kindness aspect, because essentially it's kindness, but it's also love and community, right? Just being a part of something bigger. And I think what Dad does is show Isaac, like, it's important to show up. And when you show up for people, that is the love that you receive back. And everything that Dad does, including cheering Isaac up when he is down because he didn't get the beard, was really about showing him, like, it's important to show up for people when they're down, including what he does for Mr. Williams. I think the one part that is very much my dad is Dad hands Mr. Williams money at some point in the book and just says, this is for you. He doesn't showcase it. He just kind of hands it off to him. And Isaac watches this moment and says, wow, like, and it's these little moments that you realize kind of dictate what kindness looks like. And I think Dad does that in action, and he doesn't really say it. And I think it was important for me to impart that on children, is just say, you don't have to wait. You can be kind now in so many little ways. And Isaac does that in the story.
He does. Thank you. Moni, origami was a really clever way to tell a bigger story in your book, of moving and being the new kid. Why did you choose to use that as the main way to tell your story? Because it could have still been incorporated, but.
Yes, good question. Well, this story actually came to me from Albert Whitman. So they had an idea to write an origami story, and they asked me to write it. So initially, ANZU was excited about origami, and the class was struggling, so she was kind of questioning, oh, is this art form as amazing as I thought it was? So I took that initial seed of an idea and I started writing the story. And of course, through many revisions, the story changes and the underlying theme starts to bubble up, And so for me, you saw where my history and where I came from. Those were the friendships and the making friends. That theme did surface. As I was writing it, I really found that the origami was such a great metaphor for the process of making friends, because when you do origami, there's so many starts and stops and highs and lows, learning a new skill, and crumple the paper, throw it in the trash can, maybe get it out, start a new one, get a new piece of paper, And hopefully at the end of all that, you've created something that you're proud of, or you're getting better every time. And with friendships, it's the same thing. Like, you can make friends and you have ebbs and flows, and sometimes you have starts and stops and didn't go so well. You got a bump in the road, but then you make up the next day. And hopefully at the end of that, you have this beautiful friendship or relationship, like, through it all. So it just really started to work itself out and through the writing process.
Thank you. Yes, it does that beautifully. Francis and Ginger, you are our only author duo here, and I was just curious about how the process worked when you have to write with another person.
Well, as in Grandpa's Scroll, we've never written a single word together at the same time. We communicate with the paper going back and forth. It's a silent, sacred process that seems to work for us.
Yeah, one of us pitches the idea,
Yeah.
and then the other one either says no or I like that, and then they draft it out. Yeah, but we never criticize each other.
No.
We only lift each other up, because as we all know, as authors, there are a lot of downers. So we are always picking each other up. But even if we don't like something, in the old days, we used to just scratch through it and then write a note. But now we do it through email. And we just kind of go back and forth, but it is a silent process.
Isn't it funny? Like, it's as if the sound of our own voices talking about a manuscript would ruin the spell.
Yeah,
We never talk about.
we would lose, and we feel like we would lose the voice of the story.
We've even done this with novels.
Yeah,
that went on for years.
Yeah.
We get together and we wouldn't talk about it, but it would go back and forth. It works for us.
Yes, no, that's awesome. That's what I wanted.
and it's funny because people who know us realize just how very different we are as people.
Yeah.
But when we're working together, it's almost like working as one.
Yeah. It's true.
Amazing.
And it was that way with Grandpa's Scroll as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we might have time for one, maybe two more questions. So we did get one that came in the chat, and they were wanting to know that other than your book, this is for all of you, is there a book that you love that teaches about some other aspect of your culture?
Gosh, so many. Every single one of Linda Sue Park's books I love. I mean, this one actually is about Japan, but it's Grandfather's Journey. That was actually one of the books that inspired us to write our first picture book. It was such a rarity to see a book that actually kind of paralleled our family's immigration story. And if you don't know about Grandfather's journey, it's about a man who comes to this country long ago when there were no Japanese. And it was just so beautifully written, and the illustrations were just so moving. So it prompted us to share one of our other picture books.
And I think it was one of the first multicultural books, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was the first.
No,
it
but
was a
one
big
of them.
one.
It was
Yeah.
early on. It was so powerfully moving.
Very good.
Air love would be a big one for me.
I wondered. I
It-
love that
It
one.
was, I love the process of watching a dad do his little daughter's hair and the struggle to kind of figure out what to do when mom isn't around. And just the ending is just so heartwarming when he realizes why he's having to do mom's hair, his daughter's hair with mom being ill. But I just think it's a heartwarming story where there's a lesson behind it that's a lot bigger than the hair, and just watching a father-daughter relationship with hair being a big part of the conversation.
Definitely.
I recently found a great one, and I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names, but I love this story. It was like the Big Bathhouse or the Bathhouse. It's a Japanese story about the Japanese hot springs and hot baths. And I really love this story. It just brings me right back to my childhood and being a kid with a bunch of Japanese women, you know, and you had to like get naked, and I was really uncomfortable, and you have the little towel. Actually the Japanese women just didn't care, but I was trying to hide my whole body. It's a wonderful book, and the illustrations just are amazing too. And I wish I could remember. What's that?
Is it the Big Bathhouse?
Big Bathhouse, yes. I love that story. It just takes me right back, and it's so spot on. It's so spot on.
All wonderful suggestions. Thank you, guys. The only last thing, I want to give you a chance to tell people if you're available for author visits, whether that's like in person or virtual, and how they would find you.
Well, both. And you can visit us at parksisters.com and reach out to us. Our contact information is there. parksisters.com.
Yes, and I'm available at moniritchie.com, and I'm available for author visits as well.
Yeah. And I'm available as well, but my website is not up. Give me a couple of months, guys. But you can email me at bettygtekle@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank
This was
you.
great. Thank you.
Gonna hop off
It was
my
fun.
Good. All right, I will wrap this up. If you want to turn off your cameras now, you're welcome to, or you can hang out with me. All right. Thanks to everyone for coming to our webinar today. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's video recording, title list, and a certificate of completion. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. Are you heading to LibLearnX? Then please stop by our booth, number 718, and say hello. We have buttons, copies of our December and January issues of Booklist, and the January issue of our new magazine, Booklist Reader. We hope to see you there. Speaking of Booklist Reader, have you heard? Our new book browsing guide offers reading recommendations to patrons of all ages, and it's now available in print. Go to bit.ly/booklistreader in print to find out how you can order print copies for distribution at your library. Booklist subscribers can share issues digitally as part of their subscription. Visit our website for more details and see examples of how libraries are sharing Booklist Reader with their patrons. What books did you fall in love with this year? Which stories excited you so much that you couldn't wait to recommend them to your friends? Vote in our inaugural Booklist blog Reader's Choice Awards to celebrate your favorite book cover, protagonist, villain, couple, and plot twist. Scan this QR code or head over to our website for details. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. And one more huge thank you to our panelists, Betty, Francis, Ginger, and Moni, and to our sponsor, Albert Whitman. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.